Call me Safeera. It is my name. We are walking, talking, psychological mirrors for each other. I share my stories with you so that you can find yourself somehow, somewhere in the middle. Even though I'm a mother, a daughter, a wife, a medical doctor, an artist, an MBA graduate, these are all merely labels, wouldn't you say? I'm just a girl who grew up in South Africa on a farm, and I still joke about it, but I'm a boarding school survivor. Now, my granddad was a teacher. I'm convinced he was a shaman of sorts too. Bless him. He lived to well over 100 years. Now, you have to understand, he had 10 children and plenty grandchildren, and I was probably one of 30 grandkids at the time. But from when I was yay high, call it what you may, wishing, praying, sending out into the universe a declaration, he would always ask for this one thing, that dear Safeera become a doctor. He rolled that dice. Because of the inescapable reality of what was apartheid, my parents had to study abroad. They both left in 1971 separately on a ship. It took 21 days to get to Cairo in their brave attempts to become medical doctors. So they end up sitting next to each other on day one in the lecture hall at the medical university in Egypt. They would be married to each other. And out of their particular year of students were 6 South African friends whose kids would then meet 20 years later, this time at medical school in Johannesburg, South Africa. I was one of them, and I married another. As a child, I knew with certainty that I would never become a doctor. I knew medicine only by its absence, you see. My parents worked vicious hours, spending a vast amount of their waking hours at work, always led by a roster, on autopilot, with their cute paging devices called beepers. And you know, those things do not have snooze buttons. Beeped by ward after ward, by sick patient after sick patient, trying to firefight blaze after blaze, drenched in bodily fluids, and really not even the fun kind. All I knew was that there was a price of medicine, and it was simply too high. I couldn't do it. I was wrong. Yes, the writing was on the wall, and as an adult, I attended medical school and became a medical doctor. I also knew with certainty that I would be one of those people, happy, and would live out the remainder of my life without ever feeling the compelling need to jump off a bridge. I was wrong. And on the 26th of December, 2014, I found myself standing on the edge. That moment when you're about to let go is intolerable. The body wants to refuse to cooperate, and the mind explains in all vividness why it's madness to jump. I register all the warning voices in my head, but I don't listen. I still came here to jump. So there I was, some 706 feet above the Blowkrans River, bungee jumping off the highest bungee bridge in the world. Now that bungee jump, was my leap of faith, my letting go, just free falling. And the rebound was the bungee rope jerking me back into consciousness just before I hit the ground. I also knew with certainty that the first time I ever gave a public speech and embarrassed myself, true story, and embarrassed myself by being violently ill on stage would be the last time I would ever make an appearance on stage again. Clearly, I was wrong. It's now 7:45 and here I am speaking publicly at TEDxKedge Business School in Marseille in front of you fine people. So yes, I am a medical doctor. That is who I am on paper. But it's also one of those benchmarks that has that toxic effect of a look-back sting. When I realized that I spent a quarter of my life hating medical school, I was so disillusioned. Not only did I have to brush aside any hope of making that cover of Vogue, I mean, with those blue and green scrubs, and oh, those Crocs. But worse, I was stuck in this moral maze. I even developed medical school syndrome, something medical students sometimes struggle with. Every week, I thought I had a new disease I was studying about. One particular week, I developed prosopagnosia, a condition where one loses one's ability to see faces. Bizarre, I know. But why was this happening? Maybe it had something to do with us having to pretend that the plastic dummies we practiced CPR on were real, and the real cadavers we were carving up were not. The cadavers, even with their faces covered, their names and identities a mystery, I could still feel their humanity popping up. I completed my 6 years at med school, but it was only at my graduation ceremony that something intensely visceral occurred as I closed my eyes and listened to my professor's speech. What happened next would forever change me. He said, "Each of you has many stories to tell of patients you will never forget. You will always remember their valor, their dignity, their humor, their determination, as well as their anger and defeats. You must tell their stories. I call on the stories that move you, the stories that will stay with you always, your private stories. I believe our duties as physicians lay not in the clinics, only in the wards or in the OR, but in making private stories public." The answer to my disillusion was staring straight at me. It was a psychological, perhaps even a physical blindness. The problem lay not in the nature of events. No, but in the way I perceived them. I needed to learn to think with stories, not think about stories. It's like I finally figured out I'd been holding this map upside down all this time. I did not want to live in silent desperation, and as I took the Hippocratic oath that day, I made a promise to myself. I would become an African griot, a storyteller, a teller of tales garnered from patients, which I could then use to help other patients, like a medical Anne Frank. Do you ever notice that some memories are just recorded in HD? One such vivid memory is of a man who arrived in the ER, cool as a cucumber, but also, as a matter of note, had a 2-meter-long industrial crowbar protruding from his left shoulder. He was a miner, you see, assisting with a case 3.5 kilometers underground where he slipped and fell and was impaled from groin to back. The crowbar pierced 3 of his body cavities and missed his heart by a mere 5 centimeters. But here's the thing. He had this presence of mind to keep everyone else around him calm. I continued talking the entire time, trying to keep the other guys calm, explains this man, who refers to himself as the human kebab. After recovery, he had the metal pole chromed and mounted on a stone with this verse, "You must believe in miracles every day." Another boy, 15 years old, tells his story. Let's call him Ben. He says, "I woke up at 4:30 a.m. in my tent in the Kruger National Park Game Reserve to find a hyena's jaws around my head. I was at first confused and then felt the hot breath on my neck as he dragged me by my pajama top out of the tent and sat on me. He began chewing on my face. It sounded like chips breaking in a packet." Ben survived and underwent plastic and reconstructive surgery to his mouth and jaw. But again, here's the thing. He says, "I thought my doctors were really good. And look at me. I'm so grateful. I'm almost as good as new." Now that's a warrior heart. Someone who believes life happens for them, not to them. And then there's the story of our micro preemie baby that came into this world weighing in at only 660 grams. That's just a little over a brick of butter. All she could manage were a few squeaks. After short of 100 days in the neonatal ICU, she turned from this translucent-skinned, floppy-eared, no fingernails, no toenails, covered in hair, attached to devices and gadgets, drips, tubes, and monitors, to a proper screaming, vomiting, sleeping baby. After months of neonatal magic, she was discharged at 2.1 kilograms. Her parents named her Gem. A colleague once told me, and I can still hear his voice shaking, about a perimortem cesarean section that he performed. So, a pregnant mum dropped dead in front of him, and he cut out the baby right there on the floor, and it survived. No, you saved the wrong one. You saved the wrong one, was all the husband could cry. So what do you do when your life is suddenly, catastrophically interrupted? People lose their maps. They lose their destinations. But I've found my way to help redraw maps and find new destinations through storytelling, to draw breath from truth. I've got this little box, and I've kept every thank you card, Christmas card, birthday card. These guys have survived every house move I've made. They represent the little high fives that keep me going. Those little rays of thoughtfulness from patients that really hit the sweet spot. It's an honor I didn't ask for, and quite a strange privilege. Like when a patient named their baby after me. But it's then that I know I am part of something good, something irreplaceable, and something so important. Someone worked from sun up to sundown to get me standing on this rug and to get you in that seat. I stand on the shoulders of my parents, my grandparents, and on the broad shoulders of Nelson Mandela, who in his words said that if you allow your light to shine, you automatically give others permission to do the same. I often look back and wonder, did he know that he would continue moving worlds by speaking his message long after he was gone? Did my granddad sense that I am meant to participate in this global shift in consciousness? These are big shoes to fill, and I ask you to hold me accountable. Let me be anything but mediocre. I want to give you the thought that maybe your story is less to do with you and more to do with liberating others. We live in constant uncertainty, you see. Medicine has taught me this, life has taught me this, and most importantly, my 3 kids have especially taught me this. I have an honorary PhD in humility just because of them. They may be small, but boy, are they mighty in their potential to jerk me into presence, just like that bungee cord. Tonight, this messenger is the message. We are, each of us, walking, talking, psychological mirrors for each other. I shared my stories with you so that you can find yourself somehow, somewhere in the middle.